Hi everyone, this is Ashley with CT Arena Digitals. I'm going to do a tutorial to show you how to use my shape and snoot / gobo overlays in Photoshop. I'm going to be using volume 2 for these images that I have open. I do have a volume 1 as well. I wanted to go ahead and create a whole new tutorial because I've had some questions, additional questions since releasing the first tutorial. So I'm just going to put the link for this tutorial under the first collection as well. So I have open 4 images that I want to use. I like using these most on images that the background is a little bit darker than the foreground and there's some gel lighting going on. You don't have to use them with those kind of images. That's just what I prefer to use them with, but this one doesn't have any of the gel lighting or anything. I'm just going to use one with this one to show you. You can use them really on any backdrop. These kind of images are just my preference for these specific overlays. So I'm going to do this one first. I'm going to go ahead and go to my quick selection tool and select subject. You can use your contextual taskbar to select or however you want to do that. Just make sure her selection's pretty good. I'm only really worried about the upper half of her body because that's where the light's going to be, or the overlay's going to be. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that layer, create a layer mask, and then I'm going to come down and click on my background layer. And then I'm going to go up to File and Place Embedded. Navigate to the folder wherever your overlays are saved. I want to do a web for this one, so there's a few that kind of look like spider webs, but I'm going to use this one right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and resize to where I want it and change the blending mode to screen. That is the most important part. You're going to have to do that with all of these to get that transparency. And then I want to decrease the opacity just a bit. I'm going to go ahead and add blur because it's shining on the backdrop as she's standing away from the backdrop, and you can see that there's already some depth of field around her, so that says that she's a bit of ways away from the backdrop. So in order to make that look realistic, I need to add in that blur. Okay, and then you can either use this layer mask, but I'm actually going to create a layer mask on my overlay as well. And I'm going to use a small, soft black brush at 100% opacity. Zoom in, make it even a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to clean up the edges. Brushed it on her eyelashes. I don't want that. Don't want it on her eyebrow. And just go around and clean up the edges where you need to. And that looks like that's the only place that I really need to do that. Zoom out. And now this one, I want to leave this one white. So I would be done with this one. I could, if you can use a larger brush at a lower opacity and kind of brush off the edges just a little bit. That kind of gives it more of a feathered look and can help it make it look a bit more realistic as well. Okay, moving on. So that was just if you don't want to change any of the colors, if you're just using it on white, or if you're using the overlay as white. Okay, so this is a darker image, and I kind of want to use an overlay that's going to match this purple that you see shining onto her skin. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did with the first image, use my quick selection tool and select subject. Go ahead and duplicate that layer, create a layer mask, and then click back down here on my background layer. Go up to File. You could also open the overlay, copy, and paste it into the layer above the background. Go up to File, Place Embedded, and I want to use kind of a fancy one for this one. I'm going to use the high heel. I think this one might look cool. Okay, and change the blending mode to screen. Right now this looks extremely unrealistic. Lower the opacity just a little bit, add that blur, filter blur, Gaussian blur. You don't want to add so much that it's like unrecognizable and you can't tell what it is. You want to add enough to where it looks realistic, but it's also blurred enough to where or sorry, blurred enough to where it looks realistic, but not so much that you can't tell what it is. Press OK, and it's always good to add less blur than too much blur, because you can always add more blur. You don't want to go all the way back and correct if you add too much. I'm going to zoom in real quick just to check my edges. They look pretty good, so I don't have to paint anything on or off. So now I'm going to, I want to change the color, and I want to change the opacity of this using my saturation layer. So I'm going to go and add a hue saturation layer. You can also do it in your image and adjustments, and if you want it over here, just make sure it's checked underneath your window. So I'm going to add a hue saturation layer here, and then I'm going to click this right here to create a clipping mask so it's only applying to the overlay and not my entire image. And then I'm going to click this colorize box right here, and then I want to bring up my saturation. I'm not going to do anything specific. I'm just going to, if it's at 0, just drag it up a little bit, drag your lightness down. And now, as you can see, this looks realistic now, but it's red. I don't want red. I want to change it to a purple that matches the light that's shining on to her. And then once you get your color, you can play around a little bit more with the lightness and the saturation. And then if you want, you can grab onto it once you've added all your stuff, and you can kind of play around with your angle and move it around if you want. Okay, and then if you want, since this is a smart object, since we use the place embedded to place it, you can just right click and replace contents. And if you're unsure about the one that you already use, you can click through different ones to see how they'll look. That looks pretty cool. I could flip that one too. See, I liked it the other way. Okay, that looks really, I like how that looks as well. And then again, you can always create a layer mask and brush off certain areas if you don't want it to be as bright or noticeable in those certain spots. Okay, moving on. This one's a cool one, nice and bright pink. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Quick selection tool, select subject, duplicate that layer and create that layer mask, and then click down here on background, go to file, place embedded, and I think I want to use another cool, like, fancy one for this one. I'm going to go ahead and use this one. I think this is a good image to use this one on. It's kind of like high fashion. Okay, change that blending mode to screen. Bring that opacity down just a little bit. Add our blur. Add a hue saturation layer. And now you could just leave, make sure you create that clipping mask. You could just leave it white and bring this down, and it'll kind of blend into the backdrop. But I kind of want to add like a pop of a different color. So I'm going to bring up my saturation, bring down my lightness, and drag it to see how yellow would look. Yellow would look good. Purple, I don't really like how that looks. I think I'm going to do yellow. Bring down my saturation just a little bit, and then I'm going to bring down my, oops, I want that at 100. I'm going to bring down my opacity on the actual overlay. And then I can play around with the size. Again, I think that looks cool. If you want to kind of distort it, you can go ahead and click the bounding box, right click within it, and go to warp or perspective or skew, however you want to do. But perspective will give it kind of a, you can do it like a far away, so it's angled a little bit off of her face. You can play around with play around with it that way. But I would leave it like this. I think that looks cool. Could also do like the blue that's on her shirt right here, but I'm going to leave yellow. Okay, last one, same thing. Quick selection, select subject, duplicate, create that layer mask, click on the background, filter, place embedded. I'm going to do a circle one here, I think. There's a bunch of different ones to choose from. Let's do the firework. Okay, screen. I think I'm going to keep the opacity to 100% on this one, but I'm going to go ahead and add my blur, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Press OK. Edges look good. Now she has like a yellow coming onto here. I kind of want to change it to that, but I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to add a hue saturation again. Clip it. Bring down my lightness. Up my saturation. Oop, I didn't press my colorize button. I was wondering what was going on there. Up my saturation. There we go. Pink looks good too. I think pink and yellow are a good combination of a pop. Oh, that looks good because that matches that yellow. Okay, and then if you wanted to even do like some of it a different color, you could add that, and then you could also add another layer. Right click and create a clipping mask for that. Change the blending mode to color, and then come over here and choose whatever color you want to do. Say if I wanted to add a little bit of pink in there, I could click a pink. And 27% opacity is good. I want to use a bigger soft brush and then brush in the pink, so that way I could have multiple different colors, and you can do that as many times as you want. You can do it on the same layer. I recommend adding a new color layer for each color you do, but you can add it on the same layer if you want. If I wanted to add like, let's do like a purple in there. Make my brush a little bit smaller here. Bring up my opacity. Could add some purple in there. Do like a green, which wouldn't be a bad idea for a firework. But that's just another thing you can do if you want to paint in multiple different colors. And that was the question I had on the last tutorial, was how to more easily change the color. Because if you only just add the hue saturation layer and you don't adjust that lightness and your saturation, it's not going to change very much. Just remember to change that blending mode and add that blur to make sure that it looks, to get that realistic look. Some of the overlays are already a little bit faded on the edges. If they aren't, again, just go ahead and create that layer mask and use a soft black brush at just a little bit lower of opacity to just kind of brush off those edges. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. If you're a studio photographer and you're not part of my Facebook group yet, recommend that you join that. I post a lot of stuff in there, sales and everything. If you want more free tutorials like this one, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to be notified when I add more videos.